Our third candidate this morning is Andrew Willis. We begin with his background.
I was born over on the east side of the state, Port Huron, and raised up in the Port Sanilac area, and then later lived in Gladwin, Michigan. My dad was a carpenter, my mom was a school teacher. And in the 80s, I went to what is now Cornerstone University, worked in factories in Wyoming and Walker during that time while I was working my way through school. Later, I was a carpenter and then a licensed builder. And then I was asked to participate in pastoral ministry at a small, struggling local church congregation. And so I've been in pastoral ministry now for 2.5 decades. And so throughout my life, there was the growing up in the farm community, which gave me a sense of just the concerns there that family farms deal with. And then had the experience, to work in the factory, to work as a small businessman in a small town, and then to hopefully serve God and my fellow man in Christian ministry. And so I think that's given me a varied background as far as my hope of representing the people in United States Congress.
Well, let's start with that decision. So you decide to run. We've talked a little bit about your background, and you and I talked a little bit earlier about your family. All of those things that lead you to run, why did you decide to run now?
I've had a great interest in running in politics and being involved for many years, actually. So much so that one of my pastimes, I guess you'd say, is to read political biography and American history, especially American history. So there's been a constant interest there. I never felt like challenging, a sitting congressman of my own party. But the unique circumstances of what's taking place in the 3rd District with Justin Amash leaving the Republican Party and running as an independent, and even prior to that being challenged by some of his own party, I decided that now was the time to jump in. And I have children and grandchildren, and just a great concern for their future, that they might enjoy the kind of privileges and blessings that I have in the past. And so I felt a compulsion, I guess you'd say. That's all I can describe it as a compulsion to be involved as soon as I could.
One of the things that I find challenging for candidates is to imagine themselves in that role in Washington. We'll talk about what the role is in the district. But in Washington, you somehow have to combat what is harsh partisan rhetoric on both sides. Mm-hmm. You have to somehow try to bridge that divide when it comes to doing things that are right for your district. If you were successful in getting to Washington, how do you approach that? Because it's kind of a rough place.
Yeah, it is a rough place, and it's not an easy question. I was asked the same question on Monday evening when I spoke to the Kent County Young Republicans. And my honest answer was, because I've never been there, I can't truly imagine what it's like. I know that there are people who have gone to Washington, and after 2 terms they've had it, because they feel they can't really do anything with all of the bitterness and division that's there. So I don't want to pretend that I have an easy answer for that, but I do believe that things, even in my past as a pastor, have helped me to be prepared for that kind of a setting, because I have had to be uncompromising as to my principles and yet reach out to work with all sorts of people, and to not just work with them, but to truly try to love them. And so I don't want to sound naive, because I realize it's not that simple. It's not exactly the same as the pastorate, but just the kind of situations I've been in where I've had to deal with, on the one hand, telling people truth they don't want to hear, only getting things done by bringing diverse people together and persuading them, and truly being friends with, truly friends with people who are very different than myself in various categories, atheists, Muslims, evangelical Christians, which I count myself among them, among the evangelical Christians, Roman Catholics. I have gay and lesbian friends who we truly care for one another. We're genuine friends. And so without compromising what I believe, I've had a fair bit of experience in working with diverse groups of people.
When you look at this district, you talk about diverse, it certainly is, and it spans a good geographic area that has very different characteristics from one end to the other. What needs to be done for the district, for the people in the district? What would you try to achieve in Washington?
Sure. Well, because of where we're at as a nation, I believe that, first of all, there are very fundamental concerns that I have, concerns that we remain a genuine constitutional republic, that we remain a sovereign nation that is secure, that we do everything we can to strengthen the reality of who we are as a constitutional republic. So there are fundamental things that I think need to be addressed, and previous generations of lawmakers have had, I think, the luxury of that being a given, that we're operating in a constitutional republic and believe in civil liberties and at least some sense of civility in public life. And so I think a lot of those fundamental things are threatened. So that's an area of concern. As far as the needs of this area, I think that the economy, of course, things that relate to the economy are always primary in the minds of people, and they are in mine as well, that people have, that we pursue the kind of policies that lead to economic growth, to people having good paying jobs and being able to find those jobs so that their future, young people don't have to leave the area, and that there's an economic future for them. And then I think that alleviates a lot of the troubles that are part of our culture. I mean, I believe, as a Christian, that there are always things that are deeper than economic, and that they're primary, but the reality remains that when people have good jobs, there is less of crime and less of trouble in families, and all the things that make a more stable society. So the economic things are our free enterprise system. I want to see more and more people have genuine access to that and benefit from that. I think that agriculture is a huge component in this third district. I was in a debate on December 2nd where agriculture was not mentioned. There was no question related to it, and yet it's a huge part of our life in the outlying counties. And I think that's something that needs the needs of the rural community, even though here we are in the big city of West Michigan, those needs need to be represented as well.
I always call this the Dornoch Moment, because you have usually about 30 seconds when you go knock on somebody's door to make your presentation. So as we close out this interview, here's your 30 seconds. Why are you running? Why should people vote for you?
What I would like to focus on, as to the first reason, beyond just the things I stand for, is the way I'm operating my campaign. I've committed myself to accept no more than two $20 donations or contributions from any individual or entity. That means that I have a great uphill struggle against all of the money that's already been poured into the race. And so I would encourage people to go to votewillis.com to look at my 5-minute announcement video, which gives a picture of who I am, and if they'd be willing, I'd sure appreciate them donating $20 to my campaign. I want to belong to the people. Bought and paid for by the people is my campaign slogan. I want to go with all the people knowing that I belong to them.